start this haircut by taking the section through the parietal ridge. In this particular instance, I'm using a fin shape section, which I'll explain why and how that works and the reason I've done that later in the video. But taking a section through the parietal ridge is a great place to divide the hair up when you're using a short hair cutting technique to ensure that you get correct balance throughout the shape. You can put this particular pre-section line in different places dependent on the end result, but I think if we have one consistent place where we work from, we can increase the consistency in our work because we understand how and where we need to put our pre-section for each individual hair type to create a consistent result. We then take a vertical section straight down the head, and then we take a horizontal section and we hold the hair out at 45 degrees and cut a horizontal line through our fingers. Now, this is a very, very soft perimeter that we want to create here initially because we want to allow for the ear, and we don't want the hair to sit and jump awkwardly by holding the hair down at 90 degrees. But we are going to ultimately create a strong perimeter in this particular shape because that is what has been asked for by the client. We're holding the hair out on each subsequent section at 45 degrees. Now, that's something to bear in mind as we work through this shape, that we want to be able to repeat that 45-degree angle as we travel into the center back. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. This first section is cut at 45 degrees, traveling into the nape area. And we are using that square section on the front right-hand side that we've just cut as our guideline. We then take subsequent sections and we are cutting them at 45 degrees. One thing to note here is that each subsequent section is pulled onto the previous section. So, for example, section 1 that came straight out from the head as we travelled down past the back of the ear, section 2 was pulled onto section 1, and section 3 that I'm cutting now is pulled onto section 2. Section 4 will be onto 3, and so on and so forth as we travel throughout this shape. This is something that we need to bear in mind and is very integral to being able to travel around the head shape, but also build up weight at the same time. As you can see, we're on section 4 now, and our finger angle is almost horizontal, like the first sections that we cut through the side. And our elevation is mirroring that 45 degrees that we had in our previous sections that we cut in the front, just below the parietal ridge in that square section that we started on. This is very important to remember that as we travel around the head though, our 45-degree finger angle or elevation will become more vertical, but we'd still need to remain at 45 degrees. This is a game of traveling around the head and elevating the hair at 45 degrees. Now, this is something that a lot of people take a long time to get into their head or understand, and some people will never manage to fully understand that we're going from horizontal 45 and in the same section we're dropping into 45-degree finger angle. Now, I can make a whole video on that if you wish. Please let me know in the comment section. I can show that in a much more macro way. But for the instance of this video, and let's just move on to the next section. Now, one thing that we need to bear in mind is that in this particular haircut, we will travel from one side all the way into the opposite left-hand side or right-hand side, depending on which side you start. So in this instance, I start on the right-hand side and I will travel all the way into the opposite left-hand side corner of the nape. Now, I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the left-hand side with regards to the square section, 45-degree finger angle, etc., etc. But I'm going to skip that little bit because you will have seen it previously, and I'm going to show you how I then connect that left-hand side into the right-hand side and how that works out, even though we've actually travelled all the way over into that left-hand side at the nape. Now, you can see this is our first section that is vertically down behind the ear, like the previous side that we cut when we finished the square section at the front. We can see that at the bottom of each of these sections, we've got a guideline from our previous side. So we've got a guideline from our previous side. We've got a 45-degree finger angle. We now know that we're in the right place for even balance between both sides of the haircut. Look at the bottom of the section. You'll see that there's a piece of hair that's shorter, and that travels up towards top of the head or parietal ridge section as we travel through. And this is really, really important to remember, that as we travel through these sections with our 45-degree finger angle, that we are mirroring what we did on the opposite side, even though we're working on the opposite side. A great hairdresser that trained me many years ago said, James, if you want everything to be the same and look the same, then do everything the same. Now, that can be very tricky, obviously, and it took me a while to figure out how to do that. But that is something that you definitely need to bear in mind as you work through these sections. Now, you'll notice that also we are retaining that horizontal 45-degree finger angle as we work through these sections. And we're just going to come back through now, horizontally check our graduation, make sure that it's there's no finger marks or anything like that. You know, I'm just dusting over as I go, just to make sure that we get a really nice, clean end result. We will lightly scissor over comb it at the end for, crossing the I's and dotting the T's, but it's good to check now so that you can change the shape if you need to. So once we've done that, we're going to take the crown area in its entirety of the back of this fin shape, and we're going to clip it up out the way. Now, the reason I did this, and I'm going to show you in more detail in a second, is because that particular area is very jumpy and the crowns are very, very lively on this lady's hair. We want to deal with those in a different way. So we're going to take a vertical section now, straight down the head, or horizontal as I'm standing to it, vertical towards the lady's face, and pull the hair to meet the sections that we cut in that front square section. You'll note the elevation is slightly higher than 45 degrees, and this is to encourage the hair to be slightly layered throughout these side sections. Now, there is a previous haircut on here, so we'll find that we'll run out of hair pretty quickly in these sections, and I'm just double checking that my elevation's okay and that I haven't left any kind of overhanging sections as I work through these sides. And then I'll switch back over to the opposite left-hand side and do exactly the same thing. And this is just a case of pulling the hair over, making sure I haven't left any overhanging hair there. With this particular haircut, though, what I love about it is it's the gradual build-up of weight that really makes it a beautiful outcome. It's very round and soft, and it's actually very, very easy to wear on fine hair. So it's a cracker if you've got somebody that's got fine hair who wants a lovely, sharp hairstyle. You don't have to have it sharp, actually. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I'm decided to go with the sharper perimeters because that's the picture that I was shown by this lady. But it doesn't have to be. The geometric outlines aren't 100% necessary. But I like that about it because it gives the hair that is quite fine a little bit more density on the perimeters, which you'll see at the very, very end. Now, let's just have a little look at this crown area, and you'll see that there's like a crown on the right-hand side. There's like a sort of parting in the hair that goes around. It's a very, very, very strong, difficult parting. Now, what I would do with this now is I would dry it, not cut it into the bottom sections. And the main reason for this is because ultimately, when the hair's wet, it's one length, and when it's dry, it's another length. It will shrink slightly. When we're dealing with growth patterns and we're trying to manage growth patterns, we've got to be mindful of the fact that actually what we end up doing is if we cut the hair wet and we try and blend it into hair underneath, we then dry the hair, we blow dry the hair in a particular way, the hair shrinks, and we're left with maybe steps in our graduation that we didn't actually put there because we didn't think we were not allowing for the growth patterns, or we were getting ahead of ourselves. But whereas if we do it like this and the hair's already dry and the growth patterns are already fixed and into position that they're going to live in, then when we blend it in and the lady that owns this hair, that's going to go away and blow dry it herself, tries to manage that hair, it's going to be much easier for her to manage. So doing this in this way makes the actual experience for the client styling their own hair themselves at home so much easier. They'll have a much better time just managing the hair generally. and they'll thank you for it later. I can assure you of that. So if you have any clients with difficult growth patterns, deal with those growth patterns last. So then the last little thing we're going to do here around these sides is we're going to put in that strong perimeter that I was talking to you about previously. Very, very, very clean outlines on this particular haircut for one particular reason. It's just to create a little bit of style in the structure. Now you can brush it back so it sits softer, so you don't have to wear it geometric like this, which I'll show you in the end result. We left one side down and in the geometric style, and then this side we brushed back a little bit more, so you could see that it would just sort of sit back loosely. And if you're going to cut over the ear and you want it to sit cleanly, you must make sure that you reduce the amount of tension that you put on the hair at all times. And then the last thing to do for me is always just go over your graduation with a light scissor over comb, just to make sure that it transitions beautifully into the longer hair at the top and you've got no finger marks or you've missed any bits and pieces that you might want to refine away at this point. We can also see, that at this stage that where we connected into this bottom hair using the drying and then refining in method, we get a lovely seamless transition between the two haircuts. And this is the final result. I hope you like it. I love this kind of haircut. I know that it's obviously one of those haircuts that hasn't really been in fashion for a very, very long time, but it's a beautiful shape and it creates lovely movement. You can obviously style it with more product in there, or you can have it like this, where I want you to be able to see the pure shape. This left-hand side, I comb the perimeter down so you can see that kind of stronger, more geometric outline. And on the opposite side, I did brush it back a little further so it's a little softer and sits a little looser. But it's got a great fluidity to it, this shape. And if you want more texture, more movement, more layers, then simply just layer the top a little bit more. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Life of Hair, and I'll see you again very, very soon.